Well, good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Robert Uhl with Westwick Partners, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next company presenter. The company is MiMedx, and here to tell us the story about all of the exciting products they're developing is Michael Sinkin, who is the CFO. Michael?
Thank you and good afternoon. With me here today is Debbie Dean, one of our executive vice presidents and a key member of our management team. I will be making some forward-looking statements, so we'd like to refer everyone to our SEC filings for further information. MiMedx fundamentally is a regenerative biomaterials company with several innovative platforms which fundamentally help the body heal itself. Now, in this morning's panel discussion on in the cardiovascular space, one of the panelists spoke to the need to optimize the regenerative capacity of the body. Well, we believe our Purion process tissue does just that. We've gone through an explosive growth period. To give you a perspective, back in 2010, we were $700,000 in revenue. 2013, we're at $59.2 million. We just yesterday increased our guidance for 2014 to $95 million on the lower end and $110 million on the upper end. What's driving the momentum and what drove us to increase our lower end of our guidance is the favorable acceptance of our tissue platform in the commercial market setting, and I'll talk about the changes in the Medicare reimbursement environment that's helped fueling that growth as well. Some other exciting news: in the first 3 months of this year, we have hired 44 people in our sales organization. For all of 2013, when we were growing from 27 million to 59 million, we had hired 43 people. So there's a lot of tailwind there that we're looking to take advantage of. Overall, organizationally, we've grown from a company of 33 people back in 2010 to over 275 as of the end of this quarter. You could not grow a company as rapidly as we have without having a strong leader. Our chairman and CEO is Pete Petit. If you don't know Pete, Pete is a serial entrepreneur who started companies such as Healthdyne and Matria Healthcare. Pete as well recognizes that to be successful and to support this rate of growth, he needs to build a strong management team around him. I mentioned Debbie Dean, who's in the room here. Debbie has worked with Pete for over 20 years at his various companies. But in addition to Debbie, there's Bill Taylor, our president and chief operating officer, 15 years with Pete. We also have Brent Miller, Dr. Don Federoff, our chief medical officer, Marlene DeSimone, Roberta McCaw, and Thornton Kuntz, all who have extended experience in working with Pete. Now let's talk about our technology very briefly. There are a number of placental tissue companies out in the marketplace today. It's very flattering that they are following our lead. But what we like to point out in our differentiation as it relates to our competition is that our Purion process is extremely gentle. It produces a graft that is safe and sterile, easy to handle, and has a 5-year room temperature shelf life. It is not cryopreserved with its inherent storage and thawing issues. It is also a multi-layer graft, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Now, our two main platforms are EpiFix and AmnioFix. The EpiFix platform is primarily our wound care platform, and AmnioFix is primarily the platform that we use for surgical and sports medicine applications. Both platforms have an injectable version, and I'll speak to the injectable version when I talk about the regulatory environment. From a technology perspective, we have invested heavily in clinical trials and scientific studies. There are two key points to be made in this scientific publication that was authored by individuals from Stanford Medical School and Georgia Tech. The two key points are this. The tissue modulates the wound environment, and it attracts the body's own stem cells to the wound site. Through this scientific study, as well as several other studies, we have identified over 70 growth factors, cytokines, and enzyme inhibitors resident in the tissue. This paper describes many of the reasons why this tissue is so effective in healing chronic wounds. Again, specifically, the tissue modulates the inflammatory process, induces regenerative cell proliferation, and prevents matrix degradation. So in summary, fundamentally, the Purion process tissue acts as a stem cell magnet, helping the body heal itself. You do not need to add living stem cells to heal the wound when you can recruit your own. Now let's speak to the regulatory environment. Now our sheet product is regulated under Section 361, and you can see up on the slide the requirements for Section 361, which are fundamentally the tissue cannot be more than minimally manipulated. It must be for homologous use. It cannot be combined with another article, and it cannot have living cells if the tissue depends on the metabolic activity of those cells for its primary function. What I'd like to spend a few more minutes on is an update on the regulatory environment related to our micronized product. For those of you that have followed MiMedx, you will already have heard that we received an untitled letter from the FDA back in August of last year, indicating that they felt the micronized product fell outside of the Section 361 regulations. We disagree with that assessment on the part of the FDA, but in a meeting in December, we agreed to go forward with a BLA process and enter into discussions with them on a transition plan for the micronized or the injectable product. One key point to keep in mind related to the injectable, and we talk about the growth of the company and we talk about 2014 guidance. As we've said on numerous occasions, the injectable platform represents roughly 15% of that 2014 revenue. So we had another meeting in March, our follow-on meeting with the FDA. That meeting went very well. We reviewed all of our safety data. We reviewed a number of other pieces of information that we had submitted to the FDA and had a very positive discussion. The next steps in the process are to revise our draft clinical study protocol and writing the IND submission with a meeting to be scheduled in the next month or two to take the process further. And we will continue to inform investors of the status of our discussions with the FDA when they become available. Now let's shift gears to reimbursement. Again, another sea change that's gone on, at least in the skin substitute arena. But before I talk about that, when we look at our Amnio platform, which is, again, for surgical and sports medicine applications, there are certain surgical procedures that are reimbursed under the DRG. But in the case of one in chronic wound care, we're getting reimbursed in many health plans for managed care and by Medicare under code Q4131. And at this stage, as we announced earlier this quarter, that we now have all of the MACs covering our product, representing 37.4 million covered lives. Now let's talk a little bit about what CMS did with skin substitutes. The graphic up on the screen really illustrates what CMS was looking at over the last couple of years. If you look at the slide, what you see is that the median size of a venous leg ulcer is 2.32 square centimeters. The median size for a diabetic foot ulcer is 1.35 square centimeters. The two leading suppliers of skin substitutes over the last 10 years had only a single size. And you can see on the screen the size of those two products. And so what CMS was looking at was that they understood the size of the wound and they understood how much of that material was being used. So they also understood a good amount of that material was being thrown in the trash can. So what did they do? They came back and proposed a new bundling reimbursement methodology for skin substitutes. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, first and foremost, in 2014, in the physician's office, nothing changes. And that means that they will reimburse, CMS will reimburse for the procedure, and they will also reimburse for the material at the average sell price plus 6%. In the hospital patient and ambulatory surgery center, it's a bundled rate. And you either fall into, as a skin substitute provider, into the low cost or the high cost category. In the case of EpiFix, we fall into the high cost category, which means for each procedure, for each application, the facility will be reimbursed $1,371. Now again, what does that mean for MiMedx? Because of the multiple sizes that we have, we can provide size-appropriate grafts to the doctor depending upon the size of the wound. And so what you have here is a situation where if you look at our two smallest sizes, keeping in mind that over 70% or around 70% of the wounds are less than 5 square centimeters, we have two products, one that's a little over $300 and another that's slightly over around $1,200 that fall underneath that $1,371 reimbursement rate. So for a facility that's utilizing a product, they should not lose money and should make money on the utilization of those two grafts. And again, we've seen that now in the marketplace in terms of demand coming from customers related to this new favorable reimbursement scheme for them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I see I'm running short on time. But what this slide represents, and I refer you to our website where these slides exist, this actually shows that in 2014, because of our pass-through status, we actually, or the facility will actually be reimbursed a higher rate for the larger sizes of the wound, and making it even that much more favorable for the facility. We get asked the question all the time, well, how does source of supply work? Well, fundamentally, we have 20 hospitals that supply us today. Those 20 hospitals could supply us and support $100 million in revenue. And we have another 75 hospitals that we have been in discussions with over time, some hospital systems that we could easily add to the network and grow well beyond where we are. Very, very quickly now, we have three very large markets that we're addressing: the chronic and acute wound market, the tendinopathy and pain management market, and then the barrier and minimizing scar formation, that's easy for me to say, in surgical procedures. In terms of protecting our intellectual property, we have 11 patents and another 50 pending. Some very solid patents that go out to 2028, so we have a long runway in front of us. I'm going to move ahead here. One note on clinical trials, because I see I'm at the end of my time. We have a number of clinical trials that have been completed. We have another one that will be published in the next couple of months. It is a 90-patient, multi-center clinical trial for VLUs, and we believe at that point that will put together any discussion over the size of our N in terms of these trials. I'd like to highlight one other point. As I mentioned earlier, we have aggressively added to our sales force in support of this rapid growth, and by the end of March, we will be up to 120 direct salespeople. I guess at that point, based upon the time, I'm going to end it here, and we can take questions in the other room. Thank you.